Well, hi, welcome. I'm so glad to be here.
Same,
We-
me too. We're pre-recording, so this is a different kind of intro for me
Yeah,
and Kimberly because usually we record live, but when one of us has something to do, or if it's like a holiday weekend where a Monday is off, we like to pre-record so we can relax. So I'm hoping you're relaxing at the time that this is airing, Kimberly.
I hope so too.
We have a
Well,
special guest today.
we do, yeah. Today we are joined by Anne Broyles. Anne is the award-winning author of children's books I'm Gonna Paint, Fasanella, Artist of the People, Priscilla and the Hollyhocks, Arturo and the Bienvenuto Feast, Arturo and the Navidad Birds, and Shy Mama's Halloween. Anne's new book, Eating to Save the Planet: How Veganism Helps Fight Climate Change, is for kids aged 8 to 13 years old. Anne has been vegetarian since she was 21 and vegan since around 2013. She says if she hadn't already been vegan after researching this book, she would have become convinced to make the change to a more earth and animal friendly diet. Welcome, Anne.
Welcome
Thank you. I'm
in.
glad to be here.
So, why don't we, before we dive into your books, why don't you tell us your vegan journey?
Okay. As you said, I became vegetarian when I was in graduate school around age 21. And at that point, it was more thinking about the world hunger situation and how much grain was given to animals to eat, to be eaten, as opposed to giving people that grain directly, so we didn't have the world hunger crisis that we still have. And I was happy being vegetarian. It was easy. Our relatives who continued to eat meat got used to finding recipes for us and eating what we would eat. And then, like around 2012, I think, my daughter, who, like my son, was raised vegetarian, said, "I want you to watch a couple of movies and then let's talk." And they were two movies. One was Forks Over Knives. I can't remember the name of the other one, but she said to me, "If you don't want to watch the hard parts, it's okay." And I thought, I'm going to watch the whole thing. And when I saw the little male baby chicks and what happens to them, I said, I can't do this anymore, because I also I'm an animal tender person, and I've always adored every kind of animal, but I never had made that connection as a child of, those packages of meat that came home were actually the farm animals that I adored. And so as an adult, and then my husband as well, we decided to be vegan. For me, it's part of my moral compass. I can't be who I truly am if I continue to eat animals. As people say, how do you know what not to eat? And I say either anything that has a mother, or any creature that I can look at their face, So for me, I've been vegan now a long time and no regrets. It was really not that hard to switch from vegetarian to vegan.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. It's so true because I feel that way too, that like I would not be who I am and I couldn't be fully me if I weren't vegan.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's that cognitive dissonance that we have, right? You were talking about, the meat in the packages and like if you can't watch your food being prepared and where it comes from, then maybe it's not something to eat, right? And most of us, you know, don't want to see that, right? Like, and when I learned about what happens to baby chicks, I was also very horrified. And a lot of people don't realize these things and as well as the terrible things that happen in the dairy industry. A mother cow has to be impregnated and then have her baby taken away so there's milk. And then these poor babies are what become veal. And so people don't realize these things until us vegans, this is what keeps us committed and then we're looked at as the crazy ones because we care about these things. And I think again it's that cognitive dissonance piece where it's like people just go about their day and they don't fully connect with it. And a lot of them don't want to.
Well, nobody wants to. If they
Yeah.
really think about it. One of the things I found when I was researching the book was a study about how young children, like preschool kids, uh, do you like animals? Would you eat an animal? No, no, I would never eat an animal. So then they gave them um, comes from an animal, doesn't come from an animal. So
Mm.
hot dog doesn't come from an animal. Hamburger doesn't come from an animal.
Mm.
And the study showed that kids that age already had a heart for the creatures, the non-human creatures on the earth. And the study sort of concluded that if more children were educated about where their food came from, where their meat and dairy and eggs came from, they wouldn't participate. But the parents don't want to tell them because then they're like, oh, well, yeah, that hamburger actually was, came from something like that cow that we just visited on the farm last week or whatever. So I think it's important to be clear about who we are. And a funny example today, I go to aquarobics. My teacher was saying Thanksgiving is my favorite holiday. I love it. I love the turkey butt cheeks. And she went through this whole thing, and I don't know what my face looked like, but hearing her do that, and I had just on Facebook the night before put something about turkeys and just how cuddly and sweet they can be, and I'm thinking turkey butt cheeks. Oh well. So, but I didn't talk to her about it because that's not the relationship we have.
Yeah. Do you find it hard not to talk to people when you like in a scenario like that? Was it hard for you to not say something to her?
If we had been in a one-on-one, I might have.
Mm,
I have something in the book too about don't be a vegetariable. And a vegetariable
Mm.
is the one who says to somebody else, oh, is that a dead cow on your plate? That's not helpful. My book
mm,
talks about the whole idea of ahimsa and how that's nonviolence to all living creatures. And so not being violent or speaking violently to humans is also part of that. So I think it's the figuring out when and where to bring things up and how not to do it in any kind of accusing way or
mhm,
coming on like I am on a higher moral plane than you are, or I know more than you do, but really just connecting with people human to human and then using those connections probably a little at a time. I think what we do best is to model. And then if people
mhm.
ask us questions, it's like, oh, well, the reason I don't eat meat is, and there's so many reasons.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so important. And so yeah, can you share a little bit more about your book? Because I would think writing a children's book on these subject matters is a very delicate situation. And I'm really curious to learn more about what inspired you to create it and how you decided what things to include in it. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Sure. Well, my editor asked me to write the book. I did not think of it, and I many times regretted having said yes because doing some of the research was really painful. It hurt my heart. But I felt like it was an important book, and really nothing else has been written for kids on why one might choose to be vegan. So I thought that I heard my editor say it needs to be at least 125 words. So I wrote 175 pages of 125 words. I wrote 175 pages. And then I turned it in and she's like, oh, that's way too much. So I had to cut a lot after all the work I had done doing it. And a lot of, I had a chapter called The Pig on Your Plate, one the cow on your plate, and one the chicken on your plate, just to give more details about what those animals were like, what their life was like, what their death was like. And so a lot of that got cut and it's in a shorter form scattered through the book. It's like I chose to have an illustrator instead of to have photographs because what was I going to have a picture of like a line of cows getting their throats cut?
Mm,
I wanted it to be a book that makes a difference. And if somebody can't read through the book, if it's too painful, especially a kid, they're not going to keep going. So I really try to keep a very positive, point of view, I never judge for who eats meat and who doesn't. For me,
Mhm.
it's about let's learn where meat comes from, but I can tell you more about the structure of the book and how I got to that. Let's learn about that, and then you think about who you are and what you want to do and what you're willing to try, with no judgment of, hey, if you don't at least try to be a vegan, then you're not a compassionate person or whatever.
Yeah. What books or resources would you recommend for parents whose children have been inspired by your book, Eating to Save the Planet?
You know, I have a huge bibliography at the back with
Okay.
resources of both of books, and there's some really cool groups that kids can join. I have a lot on how easing into veganism if people choose to do that. So everything from the planetarian movement to meatless Mondays, VB6, all of those ways to say there's different ways that you can try to be vegan. So I guess just look in the book for the resources. One thing that we have here, I live in Portland, Oregon, and we have a vegan scouts group. So our grandson goes to that, and it's interesting because they are a little bit like scouting in that they do outdoor things, they learn about, they go hiking. The difference is things like they go volunteer at animal farm sanctuaries,
Hmm.
and they have a whole curriculum. My grandson is in third grade, so he's in like the middle age group. And the curriculum they're doing right now, they had 1 week on why are you vegan, another one on how do you communicate lovingly to other people about why you're vegan. And then I can't remember what the one that's coming up is, but it's interesting because like when he goes to school, he's one of the few kids that doesn't eat meat. So it's we went to an event at one of our local farm sanctuaries, and he said, "This is so cool because I can eat everything that's here." He doesn't have to think about, oh, where did that come from? Because
Mhm.
it's a lot of work for any of us in the beginning, and especially looking at products and having to say, oh, this actually has gelatin in it, or whatever.
Yeah.
I love hearing stories about kids growing up vegan, and I'm starting to hear more about this. It's still not as common as I'm sure we all wish it would be, but I'm hearing more about this. Kimberly, I'm sure you like we've talked about this before, and I feel like it's so great that kids are becoming aware of it because I think again, we were talking about that before, like they connect, they connect to the appreciation of animals and respecting animals, and they have that emotional connection with them. And not that adults don't either, but as kids, like you were talking about before in the beginning, they connect with animals. They don't want to hear that they're eating an animal, right? Otherwise, they're going to want to eat it. And I think it's great. I feel like this is also valuable for adults too. It's kind of like a nice introduction to just everything that, veganism impacts. And it impacts so many things, health, you know, the planet, which is what your book is about, which is something, you don't see a lot about either. Like there is some environmental information out there, but there still is not an abundance of it. It's more about the health and about animal agriculture, about, the animal suffering, and a little bit is touched on in the environment, but I feel like there definitely needs to be more education out there to help people realize about because if we don't have this planet to live on anymore, I don't know what we're going to do. And so I wanted to ask you, what was something that surprised you the most about your research?
Oh, a number of things. The health part, I think I already knew that part, that, and that's the easy thing. For me, it was, first of all, how horribly drastic, awful the animals' lives and deaths were. But I had really never thought about the meat packers. And I feel like someone else could have written this book and it would have been another good book with a lot of the same things. But one of the things I wanted to do was was the idea of justice for people, because other people eat meat, what they have to go through. So for instance, the people who work in the slaughterhouses, first of all, they're mostly immigrant, they're underpaid, they often have to wear diapers because they don't get a break to go to the bathroom, and they have a very high degree of PTSD and suicide. So
Mm.
if you think of, if my job is to like I mentioned, that like that line of cows, and the cow's still alive when they're strung up, and there's someone whose job is to slit this throat all day long, or to do other things to different animals. We don't want to go into all of that. It's hard enough to even think that that's what we would do to a living creature. So I was really surprised of how unfair it is that the slaughterhouse workers have to do that kind of work, often because they can't get other work. The other thing I knew about the environment, but I hadn't realized what a huge impact factory farming, especially for beef, but also for pigs and also for chicken, how it impacts the whole area. So people who live in towns near factory farms, and possibly these are people who used to have their own family farm, but can't afford to do that anymore. We have very few family-owned farms. Those people, the air is so bad from the smell. I mean, the cows can't help what their physical systems do. They can't help the burps, they can't help the poops. They just aren't meant to be like thousands together in a small space. And people who live near them say they can't even open their windows because the smell is so bad.
Mm.
Children who live near there have very high incidences of asthma and other lung diseases. And then those towns where maybe it used to be, 50 different farms, and people knew each other and they had all the businesses they needed for their small town. When there's this big factory farm, then they, the vet moves away, or they have to drive 2 towns over to a library. They don't have a good grocery store. So it really, especially in the central heartland of the United States, it really affects the lives of so many people in a negative way. And that really surprised me and shocked me.
Anytime someone gives me a hard time about caring about the animals, they'll say, "Oh, you vegans only care about the animals, you don't care about people." Like, I really lean on those examples because if we're not eating animals and we're not needing these systems, people are not working in slaughterhouses and they're not doing this work, and then they are not suffering either. They think that, I don't know, like the we are helping people by being vegan, by trying to show people how they can be vegan so we can remove this from our system of how things operate here, and then people can find other jobs.
See, and
And
that's, you probably have heard this too, of people like, well, what are we supposed to do with all those animals? That's not fair to them. Well, like I look at the tobacco industry and how many people used to work in that. And I bet somehow those big companies that owned all the tobacco plants somehow found some other ways to provide income to communities. And
Mhm.
I, there's so many things that could be done differently if people didn't eat the meat. And yes, there would be a point that all the animals we have now would have to just hopefully die their natural life. And then if we don't have them anymore, we just have the cows that are grazing happily by someone who wants them to live and not become meat. It would sure, it would be a big thing to change, but it's certainly not impossible that we could turn that part of the industry around.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's interesting how a lot of people don't realize how people are suffering preparing the meat for them, right? Because again, people just go to the grocery store, it's neatly packaged, no one thinks
Mhm.
too much about where it came from, who it was, right? Because this was, as vegans, we're more aware. Like walking down, through a meat aisle in the grocery store feels like a graveyard because That's really what it is.
Mhm.
And there are, circling back to farms, and I've heard that argument before. Well, what's going to happen to all the animals? There's going to be an overabundance of animals. Well, first of all, we wouldn't have to mass breed all these animals in the first place, right? Like you were saying, they would just live out their lives, do their thing, and eventually the population would just probably be in a more balanced way with the environment. And then there are some farmers who have been converting to like mushroom farming, for
Right.
example. And it's great that there are those instances because it's showing what's possible. Like these farms can be converted to make crops that will feed people, right? And it would do so much better for the land and be less destructive for the environment altogether.
And I do go a little bit into regenerative agriculture and how that could really make a difference and give examples of already areas that are making those changes.
Great. Um, what are some other, like, what is something you would like readers to take away from this book?
I think that the main thing is just uh, children as well as adults. We sometimes think, what can I do?
Mm,
And we could feel powerless. Uh, adults, I write books for kids, as you can see, instead of for adults, because adults kind of have their minds made up and have already grown up. They've made their choices. It takes more work to convert an adult's opinions about almost anything. Whereas
mm,
children are still, they're younger, they are open, they want to do good things for the world. Don't, they may be nervous about some things they hear. If a kid's already in at least first or second grade, they know about climate change. They're learning about that. So even if we just look at that part of it, I think I want people, whether it's the kids the book was written for, or the adults that want a quick read, or the adults who are trying to support their kids, I want people to feel empowered, like I can make a difference. And
mm,
even if one of the statistics I read was something like if every family ate one meatless meal a week, it would have more impact in the long run than if every household drove an electric vehicle. So it's like for those of us who are already vegan, it doesn't seem like a hard thing to do. And for those people who have always eaten meat, as I did until I was 21, I never thought about where it came from, as I said. Uh, but it helps me to know that it helps that other people could make changes, even just a little bit at a time. It doesn't have to be, okay, I am going to stop eating meat today. Ease into it, whatever works, including I'm not a big fan of processed fake meats, but if somebody needs to go buy a veggie burger and or they need to find a vegan bacon or whatever, that's great. That's at least a start. And I know for our family, we don't eat a lot of those because there's so many delicious foods, and I think vegan food is so much more interesting than just having like a piece of meat, a vegetable, or a salad. I
Mhm.
like all the combinations. And if you look at diets around the world, globally, a lot of people can't afford meat, maybe one reason, or it's not part of their culture. So the United States is a very meat-oriented country.
Sadly. And you look around and you can see all the ways that that's hurting us.
Yeah, people who think or give that the idea attention, I think will come to that conclusion. Though I was just hearing on the radio today that uh, literacy is down like by 40% globally. And
mm,
the person that was being interviewed on OPB said, it worries me because we're going back to the time where we were almost pre-literate and we took whatever information other people gave us and we accepted it. And he said, we're losing the power to make decisions for ourselves according to what we read and learn. So that was kind of a dire prediction.
Yeah, that is very scary. And we definitely can see it. You turn on the news any day about a myriad of things, and you can see how much that is hurting us. And as someone who, from the time I was very, very, very small, has read voraciously, that also hurts me that so many kids are growing up not even having that opportunity and the joy and the comfort and all the things that books have brought to my life, knowing that there are so many people who will never get that, and then they grow up and they have no critical thinking skills either, and they're held back even more. It's that hurts.
It does, and how even fiction can make a difference. I mean, Charlotte's Web. Though I
Mm,
read it as a child and it didn't hit me about what I ate, that where's Papa going with that axe?
mhm.
Like one of the best first lines ever. And yeah, I don't know if you would love all the animals. Would you like would you still eat a goose after reading that book? I don't know. But I think it's important for us to have a lot of new ideas so that we continue to grow and to change too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also be bold enough to challenge the status quo because, like you were saying, Kimberly, things just seem to be spiraling right now in a very scary direction on so many levels in the world. And we need to think critically, and that goes beyond TikTok and Instagram. Watching TikTok and Instagram is not thinking critically. You know, I going back to what you were saying, Kimberly, I also did a lot of reading. I used to go on a Saturday or Sunday, walk to the library and just hang out. We didn't have the internet to like look up things, and I would just read books on everything, right? Fiction, nonfiction, learn about animals, other countries, whatever I was interested in the moment, and looking at books and what grabbed my attention. And now, with AI and just all these things, we have all these false narratives that can get perpetuated about, and also like lately, just circling back to veganism for a moment. Lately, the past few months, you've been hearing this narrative, oh, veganism is, not as popular, less people are being vegan, right? Because you have restaurants that are closing or restaurants that are changing from vegan to non-vegan. What are your thoughts on that when people say things like, veganism is like less popular?
I haven't really heard that a lot, but doing the research and going into the history of veganism,
Hmm.
and knowing that basically most world religions, or many, many world religions, are based on some concept of care for all of creation and include a vegan diet. So I I just the research that I've seen and what I put in the book shows that we're still a very small percentage of this country, but in other countries it's growing. And certainly a place like the United Kingdom, they have been way ahead of us on many things like labeling foods and makeup products and doing things organic. And it's easy to find vegan foods there just in any kind of grocery store. And I think it depends on where you live. Portland, Oregon, where I live, is considered one of the top vegan cities in the world. So like,
Hmm.
we can walk to 60 restaurants within 15 minutes, some that are completely vegan and some that we at least have plenty of options. So I I'm just hopeful that people don't either give up or say, oh, veganism, that's a passing fad, because I don't, it's not. And I
Yeah.
think I really believe that someday people will look back at we weirdos, if that's how they think of us, and
Hmm.
say, oh, I remember I knew this person and they used to talk about or not eating meat, or they never ate meat, and I can see now why, even though I hope it's not too late then.
I appreciate what you said about the research because the reason why I mention that is sometimes I'm the only vegan in my family, so sometimes I get challenged. People like to bring these things up to me, and I said things in line to what you answered, like, well, if you do the research, veganism's still going strong, and challenging those things. There's and you have to look at the source, right? Like, for example, if a restaurant, was vegan and then they're not vegan, were they really in it for the ethics or were they just in it to, try to make money, right? So I feel like there's a lot about intention in there. And yeah, if people do the research and look, it's kind of like, oh, vegan food is unhealthy. But if you're just eating spinach or, Oreos or, something processed, you need to have a varied diet. And people who aren't vegan aren't necessarily healthy individuals themselves. In fact, vegans are probably more vigilant about like meeting all their nutritional requirements than non-vegans because we have to be more intentional about it. So, yeah, I that's one of the things I always say when people try to challenge me on that is, you're just focusing on one little article that popped up on social media. There's so much more to what's going on in the world than just that one little snapshot that, scrolled by on your screen.
Well, and that makes me think of two things. One is it's very hard to keep a restaurant going no matter what you're serving. And since the pandemic, we've seen so many restaurants come and go. So I think that there are a lot of reasons that a restaurant can't stay open. The other thing is on the health part, the Stanford study of twins that had identical twins, and both of whom were put on special diets, one completely vegan, one really healthy, like they ate organic food, they did had to do exercise, they did all these great things. So they were both twins. I think there were maybe like 10 or 12 sets of twins. Both twins, whether the one was in the all vegan or just eating healthy, uh, made changes. And the ones that were vegan within like 6 weeks or 2 months, already their blood pressure was lower. You go through the whole cholesterol, everything, they changed. And then the ones that didn't, that were still eating other foods and not just vegan, I think were a little like, well, I want that. And I think at least at the time of when I read about it, most of the people were like, I'm going to keep eating like this. I feel better. I've lost weight. I have more energy. So I think the health benefits are really, really clear. So, I mean, my book, I start out with the personal choices and ask kids, what's your favorite food? What do you like to eat? And then talk about why we like what we like. It's cultural. It may be where we live. It's, a family history. It's so many things. And then I go into climate change and fossil fuels and talk about the whole climate crisis. Then I go to the meat industry and talk about how it is changing the environment. And then I don't want to leave. I really do try to be kind of funny sometimes and conversational so that it's an entertaining book, I think. And then and so the meat industry, like I said, the effects on the slaughterhouse workers, the family farms, the people who live near them, animal sentience, go into that, and then working for a better future. What are the laws and policies that have already changed? People
Mhm.
like Senator Cory Booker, who's constantly he's happens to be vegan and he's trying to get America to be healthier, cleaning up factory farms, regenerative agriculture, and then only then when I mean two-thirds of the way, maybe three-quarters of the way through the book, then I talk about veganism. So I'm really trying to give the readers a lot of information. And then that goes into, like I mentioned, the ahimsa, the whole idea of nonviolence to all living beings. Then I talk about the living a healthy life and all of the benefits of that. Uh, and then I go back around to food choices and then say, here are some ways if you want to make a change that you can. And here are ways that you can work if your family doesn't eat meat, like at least one of you has that, and things that kids could do, like let's have a cooking evening and everyone come and we're going
Hmm.
to make some new vegan recipes to try out. Or if you have a chance to, if you're asked to do a biography term paper or some kind of a research, pick somebody who's vegan and learn about their life. So I try to make it easy to read and conversational. and informative, but in a way, as I said, that it's not judgmental, because that's not going to help anybody, especially a kid who's just trying to learn some new ideas.
Mhm.
Yeah, it sounds great. It sounds like you've created a book that creates awareness and helps kids with critical thinking, which, as we were talking about a moment ago, is something that we need more of. And so it sounds like a really important book.
I hope so. I did a book event recently with a bunch of kids. Two were vegetarian, all the rest were not, and or didn't talk about that at least. And the two vegetarian ones, after we sat in a circle and chatted about the book, said, "I think I could be vegan." And two other kids came up and said, "I want to be vegan." And one of them
Oh,
had the mom with the kid, and I thought, oh, how's she going to feel? Like, oh no. And she said, I've been thinking about this too, and I think it's something we can try. And your book makes it look easy. And for me, that's
Wow.
that's that's the point, is just try it.
hmm Oh, I love that. I don't have children. Though I do have a lot of thoughts on parenting. And one of them is that, parents really need to respect their children and understand that they are their own people. They're separate from their parents, even if they feel like the child is a reflection of them or whatever it is that parents think about their kids. And just to allow their kids to have their own thoughts, to make a decision, to say, "Hey, I learned something and I want to do something different because of what I learned. Can you help me?" Because if you're 8, or the age range that you had there was like 8 to 13, right? If you're 8, 9, 10 years old, like you're not taking yourself to the grocery store typically and picking out all your stuff and making your own food. So you need to rely on your parents. And I hope that the kids who pick up this book, their parents will be open to hearing what the kids think about what they've read, what they've learned, and that will be willing, even if whether they think their child will stick with it or not, like to give the respect and the care to help them. So often, Jen and I have talked about this on the show, that there is an emotional piece and there is an understanding that sometimes a parent might feel rejected, or that the child is pushing away because they're trying to do something different than what the parent has kind of set up as this is the way our life is. But like, if you love your kid, like, don't you want to try and have this deeper connection by hearing them and respecting them? I don't know. So that's what I'm hoping is what's happening when the kids pick up your book and they want to talk to their families about it.
And there's a whole section on nutrition in the back matter, because I
Oh,
think some parents will be, oh, how do you get enough protein, blah, blah, blah.
yeah.
So I have that in there. I also have a section on well-known vegans that, like, most people don't know that Serena and Venus Williams did most of their, at least all the last years of their championship tennis as vegans.
Hmm.
People like Jane Goodall, who when I was doing some research on her, because she had a really interesting quote about eating, but she didn't say she was vegan. I researched more because I thought she loves animals so much. I can't imagine that she would eat them. And she had read a book by Peter Singer, I think in 1970 something, and said, I looked at my plate and I thought, this represents pain and heartache, and was not willing to be part of that. Or Greta Thunberg, so I just tried to say, here are some other examples of just ordinary people who were able to make that that change when they were ready.
Mhm.
I love that. I think by sharing examples, it helps parents get familiar with it. It helps them see the possibilities. It helps quell any fears that they have about that. And you would think a parent would want their kids to be healthy and be interested in eating their vegetables, right? Right. So,
Well, and
and
one
yeah.
section that got cut out was because some people like, oh, it's too expensive.
Mm.
And a large British study said it's actually cheaper to eat vegan. So,
Yeah, it's, you know what, it gets expensive if you get like certain processed things or you go to certain restaurants, right? But beans, rice, vegetables, all of these different things. And you can do so many creative things. You were mentioning before about how, flavorful vegan food is. It's not boring. Like that, for me, I started my journey towards veganism for health stuff. I just eliminated dairy to help clear up some skin issues, and I went on a 30-day experiment. And what I realized was dairy was making me feel horrible in ways I didn't even realize. It was my normal operating system. And during that time, I was Googling dairy-free recipes, and a lot of vegan recipes popped up. And that's when I was like, this food looks better than the food I'm making right now, right? It's more exciting. I learned to cook with different spices and different cuisines. And wouldn't normally think of making at home. Probably would just go to a restaurant to have them instead. And so there's so many more. I think people think, oh, veganism's limited, but there's so many more possibilities. And I feel like it opens us up to all types of creativity too.
The other thing that's interesting, I found out that people who are not vegan react very strongly to the word vegan negative,
Mm,
but plant-based is fine. So if you go in the store and you want a plant-based milk, it's going to be a vegan milk pretty much, but they don't put that on there because that is off-putting. So I don't care what you call it. It's a lifestyle change, and I feel like most people, if they at least try it, will see the benefit in terms of
mhm,
their own health and
mhm.
in terms of, like you were just saying, the variety of food. And I feel like we all want to work towards a better world, a safer
Yeah.
world, a world that's, as you said, that's still here. So it seems like a no-brainer to me, but I tried to write a book. It's a really, really beautiful book too, I think. And it's got like charts and things
Oh,
are
great.
Wow.
that are interesting. The illustrator did a good job trying to show things in a way that I think are inviting to kids.
Yeah.
In the beginning, I'll just read the last paragraph of the introduction is, how do you change the world for the better? You start small. You start with your own plate. You save the planet one meal at a time. And I think that's really what I'm trying to get kids to think about. You mentioned critical thinking. Just to think about life. There's so much to learn for a kid.
Mhm.
And we all learn most of what we learned from the adults around us and from what we read and new ideas. So I'm hoping, like you both said, that parents will at least give their kids a chance to read this book and then read it with them and then
Yeah.
talk about it and see what their family wants to do.
Yeah.
I love it. You're planting really important seeds.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Kimberly, was there anything else you wanted to ask?
No, I think we've covered all of the questions I had.
And was there anything else you wanted to add before we wrap up?
Thank you for having me on. I'm just really hopeful that a lot of people will start thinking about veganism, plant-based eating, whatever they want to call it, uh, as a way that we really can all make a difference. Just our little share. We're not going to change the world one by one, but working together, I feel like we can save the planet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know what? Every little, some people feel like, oh, what's the point of my little action? But again, one little thing has an impact. And we vote with our dollars, right? And they respond to that eventually, right? There's been certainly more vegan products. I've been vegan now for 8.5 years, and I've seen a lot of big change in the past 5 years, where before I would have to go to like a health food store, a Whole Foods, or Trader Joe's for vegan cheese. Now you can walk into a Walmart and get vegan cheese, right? You can find vegan cheese, ice cream, like all of the things in a regular grocery store. So I feel like that's a promising change that I've seen in the past 5 years. And so I
As,
hope it can go from there.
as well as vegan cheese used to be all rubbery and not melt,
Hmm.
and there's still
Yeah.
some like that, but we have so many better choices
Oh,
for
yeah.
cheese and ice
Yeah.
cream and all those things.
Yeah, it's definitely come a long way. Well, Anne, this was really wonderful. Thank you for taking some time out of your schedule to have this great conversation with us. And yeah, Kimberly, was there anything else you wanted to add?
No, just, yeah, thank you, Anne. I really appreciate this. And I'm so glad that you're writing books for children and showing them another perspective.
Yeah. Oh, and where can people connect with you?
Oh, yeah.
Uh, my webpage is www.annebroyles.com, and the book is sold just about anywhere,
Okay.
any
All right.
online local bookstores. I always encourage people to support your local independent bookstore if you have one, or to go online to either like powells.com or something, anything other than the business that shall not be named. Let's try to keep our money helping keep we want to keep bookstores
Yeah.
alive and well so that we can all enjoy them and buy it at a store if you can.
Great. And we can also include the link in the notes below this video as well, so
That
people
would
can
be great.
easily find
Thank
you.
you.
All right, Anne. Well, thank you so much for hanging out with us today. And thank you all for watching. And we'll see you all real soon. Bye for now.
Bye. Thank you.
Yeah.